Good afternoon, everyone. It's already a bit late in the afternoon, and welcome to this online GFD event. My name is Isabelle Giraudot. I'm a member of the Global Faculty Development Initiative here at Komaba. Before we start, let me first briefly explain that a simultaneous Japanese interpretation is available for this workshop. You have the explainer here on your screen. So if you go to your Zoom menu, you should see in the bar at the bottom of your Zoom window that there is an interpretation button. And if you click on that, you can choose between English and Japanese.
英語と日本語どちらかを選ぶことができます。ワークショップは
So if you wish to ask questions in English or in Japanese, that's not a problem. Just make sure to use the language setting that applies to you. I wanted to take this opportunity to say a few words about some of our activities at GFD. Besides workshops like this and other activities and events, one of the things we try to do at GFD is to provide resources to the faculty at the University of Tokyo, particularly to those faculty who are teaching courses in languages other than Japanese. There are basically two programs I would like to briefly highlight. The first is called LOOK, which stands for Learning and Observing Outside Komaba. And basically our goal here is to assist faculty who are interested in attending conferences on teaching and learning or observing courses or teaching practices at other universities. The second program I'd like to mention is called TASTE, which stands for Tasting Active Learning Sessions for Teaching Enhancement. Here again, we can provide resources. It can be financial help, it can be advice, it can be also peer feedback if you're interested in trying to introduce new active learning type elements into your teaching. Both of these programs are very straightforward to apply for, so there is no deadline for the moment and you can apply anytime. I have posted the link, I think. Let me, or Emma, please, if you want to share the GFD link. And then do not hesitate to have a look at our websites. Maybe a final word regarding the organization of this event. You may have already received a feedback form. Your feedback is very helpful and we would be very grateful if you could take a few minutes to fill in the form. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our three panelists. First, Shiori Shakuto is a project assistant professor at Tokyo College. She is a social cultural anthropologist and her research interests include gender, migration and environment. Prior to joining Tokyo College, she has taught a wide range of interdisciplinary courses, including gender and development, aging and technology, and Japan studies in Australia and Singapore. Michael Facius is associate professor at Tokyo College. He studies Japanese and East Asian culture from the perspective of global history, the history of knowledge, and the history of translation. He holds diplomas in college teaching and e-teaching and has taught and supervised in Japanese studies, East Asian studies, history, global history, transnational studies, and Chinese health and humanity at various universities, including University College London and, of course, the University of Tokyo. Marcin Dziazewski is a project assistant professor at Tokyo College and a sustainability science and natural environmental science expert. He is doing research on aging and shrinking societies globally, food security,
を研究しております。サハラ以南のアフリカにおける食料安全
Southeast Asia, community forest management in the Philippines, and he's also teaching in the field of environmental sustainability. So welcome again to the three of you. The floor is yours now. Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about collaborative interdisciplinary course design. Thank you so much for joining us and for your interest in our experience and discussing with us later on also. And we're going to divide the talk in several parts where we take turns talking. So it's more interesting and also in the spirit of our collaborative work. And we'll start with Shiri.
Hey, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And thank you, Isabel, for introducing us and for inviting us to share our experiences. So today's we're going to have 6 sections, as you can see, parameters. Then we'll talk about syllabus design, challenges, assessment, teaching, a session, and we will share our experience of takeaways and wrap up. So this will be the official program for today. Before doing so, I'd like to talk about one thing that might actually come as a bit of an obvious or surprise, which is why did we decide to teach at Tokyo College? So for those who don't know, Tokyo College is a very young institute at the University of Tokyo, and it is actually a research-only institute. So none of us actually do have teaching responsibilities, and we're all doing research of our own projects. So you might wonder, why do you then go out of your way to decide to teach? So the first reason for this is a very practical one, which is to provide teaching opportunities for our postdocs. We do have several postdocs who is working on different projects from different disciplinary backgrounds. So teaching opportunities will be very helpful, but it still doesn't really answer why do then we think teaching opportunity is so important for our postdocs and for ourselves as well. And that really comes down to this idea of what Milton Cox called faculty learning communities. So Milton Cox was an educationalist from the US, and he really advocated for the need for learning community in a higher education setting. So what do we mean by communities in higher education setting or learning communities? Baker uses the term to mean, I'll just quote him, a relatively small group that may include students, teachers, administrators, and others who have a clear sense of membership, common goals, and opportunity for extensive interaction. So why is this extensive interaction within the university community so important? Cox says, because it has a direct impact on one's career path as an academic. So he conducted the research in Miami University in 1995, and he realized that those faculty members who were part of learning communities had higher percentage of success at securing a tenure than those who weren't part of a community. And he writes many reasons, but part of the reasons is because you feel the sense of belonging in order to share your worries and concerns and experience of being an early career academic in a university setting. So given that Tokyo College is a very young institute, we really wanted to emulate these faculty learning communities. Also given that because we are interdisciplinary institutes, everyone comes from different disciplines. So to create the sense of belonging in a shared experience, we thought faculty learning communities was important. And to create learning communities, Duffy and Jones say, teaching is the best way to do so. The classroom creates a sense where we transcend the boundaries between teachers and students, but we all become the learners together. And in the process, we learn fresh perspective and gain empathetic perspectives. So this is why we decided to teach at Tokyo College. And by sharing our experience today, we really hope that we can extend these learning communities beyond Tokyo College to everyone in the current audience, with everyone in audience as well. So with this note, I'd like to pass to Martin to start talking about the parameters of our teaching.
Hello, so hi everyone, and thank you Shiori for introducing me, and also Isabel, and thank you very much for having us for today's session. And I would like to talk about parameters of the seminar. So already Shiori has introduced why we decided to teach and why was it so important. But actually,
しようと思ったのか、なぜそれが大事なのかという話をさせていただきました。私の方からさらに詳しくどういうパラメータで我々進めようとしているのか、どういう要素をこのセミナーの中に含めようと思っているのかというのも多種多様な機関でもあり、非常に若い歴史が浅い。
Presenting different backgrounds, so we cannot go like any other like department with more focused program, but we need to take much more wider, broader approach in teaching. So we took a few parameters into account when we were designing our seminar. So since it's a zengaku seminar, like a seminar included for any any discipline and any department. We included how we thought how to co-taught this seminar. We also thought about interdisciplinary aspects in the seminar and how to think of bilingual approach when delivering this sessions. And also we consider active learning and also how to approach it when we can do it only online these days. So can I have a next slide? So yes, so in a few more details, I would like to a little bit explain these parameters we took into account. So basically, the
考
seminar
慮してい
was
るのか。ゼミナールの設計ですけれども、知的にどの学部の学生でも引きつけられるように関心を寄せていただけるようにと設計をいたしました。学部生でもいいですし、あるいは大学院の学生でもいいですし、このゼミナールに申請していただければと思います。で、次のスライドでも示しますけれども、非常に学際的なコースであるということをお分かりいただけるかと思います。ですから、学際的ということをその中核に据えようと考えました。そのことによってコミュニケーション、さまざまな学問分野をまたいでコミュニケーションができるように、また理解が進められるようにということです。
With our diverse backgrounds, not only from arts but also from sciences, we can actually offer a really horizon broadening sort of topics that any students can talk about and actually any students can be engaged with. And can I have a next slide? So at this slide, actually, I did not intend to present names, but actually disciplines we were representing during the seminar. So as you can see, we are a very interdisciplinary team, starting from my background, which is sustainability, forestry, when thinking about food security in the future society. In my research, like Shiori, who's expert in anthropology, gender, migration, environment, and also like Mihail, which is working on the global history, culture history of Japan, translate studies. But then you can see we have another 6 person who represent diverse research topics like Japanese linguistics, comparative literature, history, indigenous people and colonialism, history of Japanese politics, philosophy, sociology, juvenile law, and justice system, art and sciences and area studies. So as you can see, on one hand, we had this difficulty to come up with one single topic, but on the other hand, we had a very strong, actually unique composition of different teachers who can really engage students in much more broader discussions. Thank you. And so in the parameters, like bilingual learning, that was another thing that we needed to consider, because we had students who are more proficient in English, more proficient more in Japanese. Same with our tutors, teachers of this seminar. So we decided to do both languages, English and Japanese, speak either in English or Japanese, or have slides either in Japanese or in English. But when we had, for instance, slides in English, we tried to speak in Japanese and the other way. So in that sense, students can understand the content and express opinions much more freely. And we are applying also active learning, such as pre-readings, assignment, in-class exercises, and presentation that could help overcome online limitation. And about some exercises, I'll be talk a little bit later, so we can share more experience how we could engage students into this online classes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next step, obviously, when also presenting on this, is to talk a bit about the syllabus design. So now that we have the parameters set up and we know that we want to teach collaboratively, what do we teach and how do we design a course that kind of represents what we want to do? So in Tokyo College, as a research institute, our main one of our main research goals and missions is the topic of the Earth and Human Society in 2015. So we do have 5 research foci. Back then, when we started with the seminar, it was only 4. The 5th one was added later. And so these research foci are about relevant global issues that have to be tackled somehow in the next decades. And in our small way, we want to further the discussion and research on these topics in an interdisciplinary manner. So the research foci are digital revolution and the future of humanity. Then second, tackling planetary boundaries through interdisciplinary approaches. And planetary boundaries are, Martin will talk about that a bit later, they are about sustainability and how our, the limits of our Earth. And then the third one is Japan viewed from inside and outside. The fourth one is about the humanities in 2050. So, and normally one way to go about these zengaku zemi, or to go about any seminar that is this diverse in its potential topics, like an omnibus lecture series would be the choice how to design the seminar. But we wanted to do something, to try something more integrated. So what we then came up with is this idea that interdisciplinarity is not just about the different topics, but as a key concern that we want to practice and teach and think about with the students who joined us. And so structure-wise, we thought it would be easy if we did the blocks on our 4 research foci. So we do have the 4 different content blocks. And I just put the math on the slide here. So we have 13 sessions. So that means we have 2 to 3 sessions for each of the research foci and an orientation and concluding session. And with 9 instructors, it means that we would take over, the 3 of us would take over 2 of the sessions, and then we would have +1 for the other postdoctoral researchers. And now I want to talk a bit about the technical aspect of, so how do we do this if we want to create a coherent seminar from these diverse elements? And I'm sure since you're joining this Global Faculty Development Program, you are probably, all of you are interested in discussing teaching and learning.
このティーチングラーニング関心があるんでしょう。もしくは教育学のバックグラウンドを持っていらっしゃる。
But so you might have heard of Catherine Tang and John Biggs' concept of constructive alignment, which is I think now a basis for much of syllabus design in higher education. And the idea of constructive alignment is that you start with learning goals, defining learning goals. What do you want the outcome to be for students after they join this class? And constructive alignment means that in order to ensure that these learning goals are reached, everything has to be adjusted and aligned with these learning goals. So that means that the assessment has to assess something that is related to the learning goals that allows us to see whether the learning goals were reached. And then after this is set up, the activities also should foster the ability of participants to reach these learning goals. So, and this is something we kept in mind when constructing this course. So in concrete terms, so we started with the learning goals, and here again, this is probably also something that most of you will be familiar with if you are teaching. This is the so-called revised Bloom's taxonomy. This is a very simple taxonomy that's been in use for a long time to think about which types of goals, of learning goals, are relevant in higher education. And this is often also seen as designed or represented as a pyramid, because the basis for every kind of learning goal has to remember facts, right? It has to be a factual basis. Then these facts.
がなければいけないということです。この事実だけでは十分ではなくて、その次のレベル、これは理解です。その事実の関係を理解しなきゃいけない。それを理解した上で応用ができるわけです。その上で
these different elements apart and analyzing and really understanding on the deeper level of their structure. The next higher level would be evaluation. So, which basically means creating a personal stance toward your subject, right? What do you think about it, and how can you evaluate it? Not just positively or negatively, of course, but in any way that you find your personal stance towards it. And then the highest level would be the level of creation, doing something with it yourself, going on to, put not just into practice what you learn, but creating something new. And of course, all of these are interrelated. And ideally, every class should attack all of these learning goals to some extent. And so that was what we were trying to do. And so we defined the learning goals for our class like this. After successfully completing this course, you will have a basic understanding of some of the key challenges faced by Japan and global society in the next decades. Be aware of the need for interdisciplinary research and its characteristics. It's also about understanding and analyzing. Then to be able to analyze issues from different disciplinary perspectives and develop your own critical standpoint. This is basically about application, learning about what interdisciplinarity means and then applying it to different fields. And then finally, to be able to debate and evaluate Japan's position in the world and its potential to contribute to the solution of global issues. Of course, this is all for undergraduates, first year, second year students. So that means, of course, there's no, we cannot expect any background knowledge in particular on any of these subjects, but it's still entirely possible. And I think we had a great success with this class in this regard, to practice all of these different points. So, and let me now briefly show you, before that, so we also thought about, like, if you have these learning goals, then lectures are obviously not sufficient, right? If we just talk about our expertise with these different aspects, then analyzing like these higher levels. So that's why we separated the whole seminar into different session types. So first of all, the introductions, which were both basically inputs by Tokyo College members and some open discussion and introduction. Then the lecture series, which we also try to break up a bit with a couple of short breaks for reflection and discussion, but this is the closest to a classical lecture. Then case studies, which were like a short lecture plus discussion based on readings that were prepared by students beforehand. And this was specifically also with our postdocs in mind, who have a specific area that they just finished working on in their PhD that they're experts on, so they can talk about this concrete area as an example, basically for the broader issues that are part of our 4 research foci. And then we had another session, which is an exercise, which was not about input from our side as instructors at all, but which was much more based on group activities that would rely on what was learned and practiced and discussed in the previous sessions on that block. And the last sessions was what we called a forum, which was entirely devoted to the presentation of student work and discussion. So this is what the finalized syllabus looked like. So we had a warm-up session, which introduced the seminar in Tokyo College. Then to drive home the point at the beginning that the combining, or like the bracket for the whole seminar, is interdisciplinarity. We had one session where we just talked about what interdisciplinarity means and why it is relevant, and discussing some simple cases. And then we had like these 4 blocks, as I said, about our research foci, digital revolution, social change, tackling sustainability challenges, and so on. And we broke that up sometimes in 2 parts, one with a lecture and an exercise, sometimes in 3 parts with a lecture, an exercise, and a case study. And I'm not going to read out loud all of these different sessions that we had. In our part 5, Martin will discuss block 2 as an example of what we did in these sessions. Yeah, so much for the syllabus design. Now, after that was settled and we recruited our co-teaching team, and we sent the syllabus to the zengaku zemi professors who were responsible for the program, we now had to think about how to actually go about implementing this program. So, and 3 of the challenges we saw was, first of all, accessibility, then the second one, coherence of the seminar, and the third one, the bilingual format. And I'm going to talk about these 3 now. Expect any background knowledge on any of these topics. Basically all the faculties, online learning aspect, because we hadn't, I think none of us had a lot of experience or online, and because of Corona, we now had to, take that into account as well. So, and thankfully, the University of Tokyo had a great, those of you who are teaching here, you will know about it. They had a great effort this is called UTokyo Online Jugyo Web Kaigi Portal site, Saito, and they did a all kinds of, for the summer semester, they did all kinds of evaluations and so on, so that they could really understand what had worked and what hadn't worked so well in the first semester of Corona-based online teaching. And here, what is very interesting to see, that over on the left side, you can see this graphic, and you can see that, interestingly, despite the very difficult conditions for everyone with the first semester teaching online, most of the students were rather or very happy overall with the online lessons, from 7 to 10 points. So that was an encouraging thing to start with. But still, there were concrete points that our colleagues at UTokyo found out that bothered students, or that kind of encumbered or inhibited learning in the online situation. One of that was a tendency to do too much, so too many activities and resources and too much homework in the online classes, then exhaustion. So they found out that the average screen time for first-year students was actually 28 hours per week, which is an awful lot. For a learning situation. I mean, even for meetings, it's a lot, but if you're supposed to be active and engaged and learning, it's even more. So that's also, it's harder to concentrate because you don't have the offline setting. I'm sure you know all of that from the last years. I'm not going to discuss all of that technical issues. The session's not recorded, and so, and no chance to interact in real life, and so on. So lessons for us in this regard were that less is more. Reduction of screen time meant maximum of 90 minutes, not the 105 minutes. Trying out hybrid formats and variation in teaching. So this was something that aligned very well with what we wanted to do anyway. Have a different rhythm, not a lecture format every week, but having different formats. So, and then breaking up the sessions for individual reflection, reading, watching a clip, and so on. Using of breakout rooms and engagement techniques. And also thinking about preparation time. So thinking about, for first year students, to don't have too many readings per week to prepare and too many pages to prepare. So then we thought about engagement techniques. So, and I'm just sharing here for discussion and exchange later with you about your experiences. I'm sharing some of these techniques that we used. So first of all, we stated and reviewed the learning goals, not just for the seminar, but in each individual session. We said from the beginning on, this is what we expect that you could take out of this particular session, and this is how it connects to the wider theme. So to really make clear in every session that every session is a part of the grand scheme of things, and not just an individual topic that can be forgotten about afterwards. So then we had guiding questions for the readings that we shared with the students beforehand, so that they could more easily access the readings. And we picked up on these guiding questions during class as well, so that there was a clear connections between the preparation and what we did in class. Some of the classes we started with questions and tasks for students instead of talking right away from our side immediately, like an individual reflection. Do you worry about climate change? Something that connects to personal experiences and attitudes, or small group work in breakout rooms. We also took care to mostly vary between, in each individual session, to vary between a plenum, between individual time and small groups. And also that no single activity should be longer than 15 minutes, so that there is some kind of, merihari, like a kind of change between different types and speeds and engagement levels. And also, because it's interdisciplinary, we really tried to make sure that the explanations and language were not going into too much of the technical jargon that we are used to when we do upper level teaching or when we talk among our colleagues. So coherence, of course, was still a big issue that we had to discuss. So we had an orientation session beforehand with everyone who participated, which was, I think, 3 hours long or so, where I shared some of the ideas how to achieve coherence, and then we all talked about our own experience in teaching before, and we tried to think about ways that we could collaboratively make sure that the participants will experience this as one coherent course. And in particular, there were 3 levels. One is formal coherence, the other is coherence of content, obviously, and the third one is also coherence of process. And I'll also briefly talk about these. So formal coherence, I'm just sharing again some of the strategies that we try to employ. So formal coherence means, for example, that we used identical Zoom ID, even though we had 9 different teachers. These are all very simple things, right? But like all together, they had the goal to integrate the class. Then also same rhythm, that everyone should be there and available in the Zoom room a bit earlier. Everyone should do the same kind of time management. Then also a systematic use of the LMS, the learning management system, not everyone dropping, their files and so on, however they like, but that we have identical file sharing patterns.
同一のファイルの共有のパターンを取る。まず必読の資料ですとか、ガイディングクエスチョンを出すですとか、あるいは発表をしておく、アナウンスをしておくことによってコミュニケーションをよりスムーズに図るといったようなことも入っています。それから、やはり単純なことですけれども、同じ CI を使うということです。パワポのテンプレートを使う。ほとんどの教師はこういうことを使っておりますけれども、同じようなゼミナールであるということが分かるわけです。東京カレッジのビジュアルが背景に使われておりますので、ですから形式上の一貫性も大事であります。それから中身の
think about coherence of content across the whole seminar with all these different topics, but also inside the content blocks, and then from week to week, and also leading up to the last session, which was about the student presentations that Shiri will introduce later as part of the assessment block. So here, I think we were helped a lot by this idea of constructive alignment, because we basically had set up the basic parameters of how to do the syllabus and how to carry out the sessions. So that was actually not too difficult to achieve, because we could communicate and explain what the learning goals were and how each individual block contributed to the greater scheme of things. But still, some things that we did for content coherence was we tried to link to the common theme of human society and global challenges in each week, and to the issues, discussing with the students how this relates to interdisciplinarity, how interdisciplinary approaches are needed for all of these challenges. Then trying to make some connections, reviewing last week, wrapping up this week, and having an outlook to the next week. So that even though the instructors changed every week, still we could pass the baton to the next person. Also, we had a preparatory homework and built up to the presentations in the last sessions. So in each week, most of the weeks, we also set aside some time to think about the presentation that we expected in the last session. And many of us join other sessions inside the same block, or like sessions with other instructors, so that there was mostly more than one instructor present in the classes, and we could see how the others actually did their sessions. Okay, in terms of coherence of process, this is perhaps also one interesting thing to share. We created a Google spreadsheet for the whole seminar. First of all, one for the whole seminar, and then one tab for each individual session that followed the same format, where each of us put in before the session started an overview description of the class, then the readings and learning goals, and also a lesson plan, right, including the time keys for like 10 minutes doing a plenary session, and so on. And then a comment field also for personal.
それからコメントのフィールドも作りました。これは個人的に内省ができるようにということです。それからスプレッドシートを使って、この授業関連のリソースの共有を図りました。で、ティーチングコミュニティだけではなく、どのようにそれぞれ教育指導の経験も違っておりますし、背景も違うということで、全体としての経験をまとめる、それをリソースとして共有していこうということになったわけであります。それからコミュニケーション、そして調整連携も行いました。当時はスラックは使ってませんでしたので、Eメールでお互い同士コミュニケーションを取るということをやっておりました。で、スプレッドシートがメインになったわけです。スプレッドシートはこういうものです。繰り返しになりますけれども、それぞれのセッションごとにタブが設けられております。で、私がセッション後のノートとしてメインブロックで教えた後にこういうことを書きました。ですから他の教師も読めるようにということです。最初の実質的なこのコンテンツのセッションである楽しかったよと学生たちもかなり関心を持ち始めたようであると。で、建築とか音楽とか医学ですとかそれぞれの関心トピックを取り上げることができた小グループセッションは非常に面白かったようです。 で、マイナーな問題は、何々さんは接続が悪かったようで、やはりメールで書き出す以外はなかったと、それから何々さんは常にビデオをオンにしていたので、また英語で流暢に話してくれたといったようなノートを書いてます。それから最後の点で、やはり課題となると思ったのは、やはり日英両言語で日本語のネイティブの学生もいるわけですけれども、で、LMS のコミュニケーションは全部日本語でやりました。それから、この教育指導でありますけれども、スライドは全部日本語で、話すときにはほとんどの場合、英語を使いました。ですから人々はやはり英語のリスニングの練習もできるようにということでした。そして馴染んでもらうということです。そして同時に日本語のスライド法で確認もできるという形にしました。また特に当初はチャットベースのコミュニケーションを奨励しました。それによって英語でのこの貢献のハードルを下げようということです。日本語でも英語でもいい、一言でもいいとキーワードなどを書いてもらえれば、そうすると、それを手がかりとして日英両言語の授業に入りやすくなるということです。それから小グループ分けの時の日本語と英語とミックスでやる、英語と日本語両方で行ったり来たりする人もいるし、あるいは日本語だけ、英語だけという人もいますけれども、どちらの言語でも使いやすい方を使ってもらうということでした。で、それぞれの能力、流暢度も違いますので、言語を大きな問題にしないようにしました。それから最後の発表、これはスライドは英語で、そして話すときは日本語でも構わないということにしました。信頼を構築するということができたわけであります。自由にそれぞれの言語能力に関わらず自由に参加できるように。
Like there was a gradual shift to more English usage among the students throughout the seminar. So that was, I think, a great success in that regard. Okay, now I'm finally finished and let Shiri continue.
Thank you, Mihail. Okay, so I'm going to talk about assessment. Would you mind clicking the next slide? Thank you. So we had two challenges in designing the assessment. The first one's how to create a meaningful assessment that allows students from different disciplinary backgrounds to bring in their perspectives and interests while sticking to the theme of interdisciplinarity. So how do you test interdisciplinarity? And then how to plan for the assessment across the semester. So as Mihail was explaining, each lecturer was taking on different subject matter each week. So how do we then build the students towards that assessment throughout the semester? So these were the two challenges that we had. And one more challenge, it was also the fact that because it was in the parameters of zengaku seminar, the assessment wasn't graded. So initially we thought, oh, okay, so how are we going to motivate students to commit to doing the assessed tasks? But then we quickly thought, well, wait, maybe this is actually, the fact that it's not graded is an opportunity for us to design an assessment that doesn't, instead of testing students, that actually is designed to assist students to consolidate their learning, and also to design assessment that actually serves a larger goal of building a faculty learning community that we touched upon earlier. So with that in mind, would you mind going? Thanks. We set up the 4 purposes of assessment. The first one was to apply.
まず第一に、この授業の学習を実践に移す。で、学際的な思考法や実践を取り込んでいく。これは学生たちを助けることができるということです。学習に集中できる。そして、ファクルティーラーニングコミュニティを作るためのものが後の要素であります。で、ピアレビュー、そして、お互いにコラボレーションをするというスキルを得てもらう、そういう経験を積んでもらうということです。コミュニティの中での経験を積み重ねてもらうということです。ラーニングコミュニティで一つ大事なのはコミュニケーションのスキルであります。それぞれ背景が異なるということがありますので、コミュニケーションについても異なる学部、異なる専門分野を持った人たちがプレゼンテーションのスキルなどを身につけて
We wanted to provide opportunity for students to practice public outreach through writing for public audience. So as we mentioned at the beginning, we wanted to create a faculty learning community, not just within Tokyo College, but also within Tokyo University as a whole. But then it doesn't have to stay within the walls of university. We can also extend this learning community outside. And one way to do it is to write for public audience. So we wanted students who wanted to do so an opportunity to do that if they so desire. Can you go to the next one? Thank you. So with these purposes and challenges in mind, the assessment that we finally designed is called Future Lab. And it's essentially shared Google Docs where students share their ideas and provide feedback to each other's ideas. So what we asked students to do was to provide initial answers to 3 questions and to provide feedback. So the first question that they had to answer was to choose a topic related to the Earth and Human Society in 2050. So that was the overall theme of our zengaku seminar. So choose a topic, one topic that they were interested that speaks to that theme and describe the current state of the chosen topic. And then secondly, what are different types of knowledge and resources needed to tackle the topic? So this was the question where students had to in their own time or in the classroom, like the one Mihail was talking, do some research and build their knowledge from writings by different expertise, people from different expertise to answer that question. Then the third one is, what is your take on the topic? Why do you find it interesting? What are the potential developments and solutions? So this is where students were encouraged to really bring in their own perspective in that topic that they chose. Okay, could you go to the next one? Thank you. So just a way to illustrate how we built this assessment, this is a timeline that we set up for students. So in week 4, after students were introduced to the whole idea of interdisciplinarity, Tokyo College, and the topics, we asked students to decide on the topic. And 2 weeks later, the students were given 2 weeks to then share their first thoughts on the 3 questions that we shared just now. And then 3 weeks later, within 3 weeks, the faculty members, so we provided first feedback to the students' initial thoughts, and the students were given an opportunity to revise based on our comments. And then in another 2 weeks' time, the peer review happened. So the classmates were invited to provide feedback to the revised drafts by their peers. And the students were given an opportunity to revise, do the final revisions based on the peer review. And in the last week, week 13, students gave a final presentation. Next ones, please. Okay, so here are some examples of students' topics. As you can see from this, many students came from different
多くの
backgrounds.
学生それぞれ背景異なっています。医学ですとか、建築設計ですとか、あるいは工学ですとか、社会学です。
Prize chose art, music, and design as a running theme. So I think a lot of students were using art in order to have a fresh look at the more traditional issues such as medicine, suicide, or social issues. So that was really interesting aspects of students' choice. Can you go to the next one, please? Thank you. Okay, so here's an example of initial research conducted by students on the platform of Future Lab, which is a shared document. So this student had decided on the topic of art and medicine. So in the classroom, she conducted some research on this particular topic. So here you can see students went online to look at some buildings, architectural buildings that's designed by architect, but that provided alternative aspects of hospital and clinic.
病院やクリニックについても何か代替的なアイディアが提供されるのではないかということでした。そしてこの研究をもとに彼女は当初の先ほどの3つの問題提起に対する当初の答えを出していったわけです。私は非常に嬉しかったんですけれども、2つ目。
So what she did was building on this existing research. She said the problem with the current hospital system is that it's too much focus on cure. But then the hospital should not be just a place of cure, but it should also be a place of care. So she was talking about the transition between cure and care and how art can play a role. So I thought that was a fantastic approach to the topic that she has chosen. Second, thank you. And this is an example of a peer review provided to that particular students by her classmates. And I was also blown away by the level of engagement given by students, peer students. So for example, the second students wrote, art must be good for relaxing, but maybe it will strengthen your argument if you add some existing research that actually says the art is actually quite relaxing bodily, which I think is a very constructive comment. And then the third student said, but hospital is also a place to provide hygiene. So is art and hygiene compatible? Which is such an insightful comment by a peer as well. So this student who received this comment actually took on all this advice and revised the draft and reflected that onto her final presentation. Next one, please. Okay, so the final presentation. So for final presentation, we ask students to adopt this style called Pechakucha Style. And I'm sure some of you in the audience have already heard of it, but it's a visual storytelling presentation method that was created by two architects in Japan in 2003. So basically the gist of the idea is the presenter is only allowed to spend 20 seconds of commentary per slide. So if I was doing Pechakucha Style now, I would fail. The idea is you have a lot of images, very few words on the slide, and you just keep moving through the slides and let the images tell the story. We thought this was a fitting style for this cohort of students, given their topic. Given that all of them chose a topic that's focused on art, music, and design, we thought the communication method should also reflect their topic, which is visual. So we thought that worked really well for students. Thank you. And lastly, we provided an option for students who wanted to do so to transform their final presentation into a written form and publish it in a Tokyo College website. So Tokyo College provides a platform for blog articles, and one student who chose art and medicine as her topic, chose to pick up this opportunity. So what happened was she wrote the final presentation in a written form, and we provided several rounds of feedback, and she revised it. And we also provided an English translation. And we just published her piece early this month at Tokyo College blog. So please go and have a look at her article. I'm very proud of her achievement. But what made me feel really happy about her article was also the fact that it extended this learning community outside of university. So I actually wrote this link, sent the link of her article to one of the architects that she cited in the blog piece, thanking him for the use of images in her blog. And he said, oh, actually, I was just giving a lecture at another school, which is an initiative by Fukui City to bring together people from different backgrounds and discipline and expertise to talk about contemporary issues. And they were actually talking about this idea of health and healing. So he was a guest lecturer. So he provided the link to that initiative. And then now the students have that link to the initiative. So this is really an example of how sharing your idea and putting it out there also open up opportunity to get connected with people outside of university who share the same interest. So we're very happy to see this come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiori. And I would like to a little bit talk about another teaching example of a teaching session. So can I have next slide? So I was in charge of two classes, and one was basically more like type block of a lecture.
レクチャーブロック、その後演習があるというものでした。次の週が演習だったんです。プラネタリーバウンドリーを通して持続可能性のチャレンジを取り組むというものですけれども、皆様方、プラネタリーバウンドリーという概念をご存じない方、これはストックホルムリジエンスセンターが出したものなんですけれども。
And sustain our society within the Earth limits. So we should not exceed the limits that actually our planets have entailed. So in that lecture, I talk about sustainability problems, planetary boundary concept, about how actually our society should look in the future, and which way what type of approaches there are existing in order to start designing the more sustainable future and overcome sustainability challenges. And in the next week, it was an exercise that I asked actually students to think of designing future society that could fit within these 9 planetary boundaries. So can I have the next slide? So, so after the first more theoretical lecture, I asked actually students to give some thoughts prior to the exercise session that was followed in the next week. And the question that I gave to students to think of, and those which will be discussed, in the following week, was what is the future society, and how should it look like, and what are challenges and opportunities, and how can we backcast the future society we want. And just to explain, the backcasting is sort of like a method when we think of the target, what sort of future we want, and in order to reach that point, we need to backcast and find out what step we should take in order to reach the goal. And the topics and areas that could be considered, and I just was just a suggestion, but very open for any other expansion by students, were like energy, industry, housing, transport, and IT and digitalization, food and water, education, work, leisure, like the off work. So basically, the idea was to give something which is very relatable to everyone and to any discipline, and actually that any of us should think when studying own discipline, that should think how actually my own discipline can be utilized in the future in order to achieve a better society that we need to live in, we will be living in the future in. Can I have a next slide? So the format of this exercise was that I divided students into two groups in the breakout rooms or in the Zoom. And probably you're familiar that Zoom has this option of dividing people into breakout rooms. You can do it randomly.
ご存知だと思いますけれども、ランダムに分けることもできますし。
To move to a specific group. And then each group received like 20 minutes for the group work. You can always extend it for a bit, and always you can broadcast a message to the group. For instance, you have still 5 more minutes, or we are extending for another 5 more minutes. So it's a little bit more stimulating students to wrap up their discussion that had within the group. And each group actually had a facilitator, as earlier Michal said, that actually each session was attended by more than one instructor. So there were always other researchers and assistant professor from the Tokyo College that present during the session. So it was actually much more easier to assign a facilitator to each session. So either the facilitator can stay like a little bit muted in discussion, or respond to any question, or even do more like a stimulation for the discussion. So the trial we did was starting to work on the Google Slides, so people can write in the same time simultaneously on the slides, because in a classroom, it would be like a piece of paper or whiteboard that people can do more brainstorming. But in the online environment, we need to ask to stimulate student discussion in the online environment. And Google Slides actually were quite good tool for doing it. And after that group work, students did a presentation, and it was followed by Q&A session. Can I have next slide? So as you can see, I will show you like 2 examples of this Google Sheet slides. So you can see that
なんですが、どんなプロセス このブレインストーミングをやったときにどういうことを考えてたかですけれども、このトピックというのは身近な問題です。現在の状況、みんなに関係しているものです。この議論をしている中で、例えば
in the pandemic and the telework become quite common, the same comes for the online teaching. So students were kind of keen and eager on discussing merits and demerits of moving to the countrysides, and how it should be like supported by the governments, or what sort of different campaigns there exist. And also, well, they see a lot of benefits coming out of teleworking as well. And so that's why the discussion was quite going well. If I can have next slide. There was also another discussion about like again about the digital and the future, and about internationalization, about changing the Japanese educational system. And that thing actually I was not very like expectable to come out from the first few students are already very critical about university education, but they're critical in a very good way. So they see many like opposite different sides of current Japanese educational system. Can I have a next slide? So these are here a few of my reflections, what actually came out of this session, that actually working in a breakout room went very well, and engagement in the discussion with each other was actually going very well, and facilitators, what I noticed also were quite enjoying these discussions. And actually small groups were less intimidating, so people were much more freely to, students were more free to talk, it was more encouraging and small environment that they could exchange some ideas and ask each other some questions. And actually in the first class, when I had more lecture type and when I was asking students to give some comments, they were actually much more hesitating. While working in the breakout room, it was much more smoother, and actually people were definitely engaged. And this type of breakout room discussion, I found it much more useful and actually applied in another occasion that I had to teach. So students came up with really interesting ideas on changing society. And actually on the Q&A session, I was very surprised, but students came out with many questions to each other and many critical and interesting questions and comments. So actually this session went very well, and I'm really looking actually forward to repeat this type of exercise in the future. Thank you. So these are a few takes away, and that actually each of us a little bit sum up out of these classes. And may I have next slide? So again, we'll just go fast, like in the breakout rooms again went very well, and actually using also the shared document for, instead of like whiteboard or big piece of paper for writing ideas, went very well, and people were quite cooperating in that group work. And so as I mentioned earlier, the first class on Zoom was more challenging because students were more like hesitating to respond to questions, and I think sometimes calling by name to give some comments actually was much more helpful. But that was definitely another issue when we were working in breakout rooms. And then for having facilitators in the breakout rooms was very like helpful. Facilitators and students enjoy the conversation with each other. And interdisciplinarity. So this type of topic that is relatable to everyone, like future society, how our future life would look like, it's actually very like engaging to discussion, broadening this horizons, and it gives more thinking beyond on the own discipline, because they can discuss in a more interdisciplinary context, and that stimulates discussion. Thank you. Shiri?
Okay. Yeah, so there are a few takeaways. First one's less is more, and that's more a lesson that I personally learned. Because there are 13 weeks and we had about 10 lectures, so we only had maybe 1 or 2 opportunities to interact with students in this particular course, and therefore, like, I personally almost felt the need to tell everything in that 2 hours, and I think that looking back, it was overwhelming. So I think if anyone is thinking of doing a collaborative teaching in the future, perhaps consciously leave plenty of room for students to absorb ideas, especially if they're all coming from getting exposed to these different ideas from different people, and yeah, let them soak and transform their ways of thinking. So that's more future. The second one was, I was really surprised to see the students' interest in the potentialities of art and music in shedding new light on social issues, as it was evident from their choice of topic. So going from that, I thought perhaps that can also be applied to our own teaching as well. So perhaps we should go beyond our classic reading and discussion style teaching to perhaps include more of art and music to guide our teaching. So this using art and music in our pedagogy, that was one thing that I thought I would personally love to read more about and do in the future. And the last one is more of the comment that designing assessment without grades can be quite challenging at first, but our experience was that this is also an opportunity for us to design an assessment that help students and also to answer a larger the aim of learning creation of a learning community. So I thought that was actually a great opportunity to be able to design the course without grades.
Okay, yeah, and some final thoughts from my side. So my feeling was that this constructive alignment based design was very crucial to making this seminar work as a proper seminar and not just as an omnibus lecture series. So, and also once we set all of this up, it made collaboration among ourselves relatively simple, even though like all of our team, we even hadn't met each other. I think like only once or twice due to Corona in real life, right? So for us, it was also in that sense a team building exercise to collaboratively teach the seminar, and that worked exceedingly well. And I think part of that was because the framework was set up and thought about clearly in the beginning, so that we had to fill it with life instead of rearranging and trying to make something up on the go. So, and in that context, also extensive communication throughout the seminar among ourselves was extremely useful to keep everyone, on not just on track, but keep everyone on the same page about where the seminar was going and what was working and what wasn't working and what we were learning also as instructors, because part of the idea of the learning community is, right, that not just the students are learning, that we all are taking something away as educators from this experience. So one challenge was, I think, to balance the individual instructors' autonomy in taking care of their own session, and but also thinking about the overall coherence. I think that for us it worked very well because we're also a young team and everyone was kind of on the same let's learn something together. But of course, if you have some with a lot of established colleagues who have a lot of teaching experience, who have their way of doing things, I assume that can be a challenge to balance that in a nice way so that people don't feel they have to give up what they have been doing in the classroom just to make it fit into some framework that someone else decided for them. And of course, the development and coordination is time intensive. This is not to be denied, like talking after the classes and so on, and taking care of the coherence of the whole class was time intensive. But of course, it's also something that once you start doing it, you get better with practice. So we're going to teach the updated version of the seminar again in autumn, and of course then it will be a lot easier for us and a lot less time intensive because we all have established this community and we know that we can that we can cooperate in this way and how to create a successful seminar. So I think the starting time and effort that is needed might be a hurdle for some, but for me personally it was totally worth it. So, and now as an outlook, last slide. So where we would like to go with this is also expanding this learning community beyond Tokyo College. As Shiri also said at the beginning, we are totally interested in interdisciplinary teaching collaborations also with other departments. We are a young institute and we are also still building also our networks inside the university. So we would be totally interested to hear from you. Also, what are your experiences with interdisciplinary teaching, learning from you, but also if there's an opportunity collaborating with you in teaching matters. Also, in particular, sharing and profiting from expertise from colleagues in education studies. We are, after all, lay men and women when it comes to the education studies theoretical background. I have some teaching certificates and so on. So I did some classes and seminars and so on, and have my own teaching experience and read a bit. But of course, it's would be also interesting to cooperate and learn from our colleagues in education studies, and in that sense, perhaps contribute in the future to the scholarship of teaching and learning in the wider sense that a reflective practice of teaching should be about. Okay, that's it from our side. So thank you very much for staying with us so far. And I don't know if there's going to be a moderation. I think now we have an open discussion.